Welcome back to the Blog and Dirty podcast, where bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm here today with Chief Analytic Officer of FTN, Aaron Schatz, the creator of DVOA. Aaron, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, thank you for having me on, my man. Good to be here.
Yes, you can teach me a lot and our audience about analytics and maybe some stuff that we don't know what could potentially happen with the Atlanta Falcons. But first, I want to start with this. So you've created DVOA. Can you explain this to, in layman's terms, how you came up with that formula and how it's transformed football?
Yeah, the basic idea comes from a book called The Hidden Game of Football. And it was to create success, look at the success of every play based on the down and distance, so that you were accounting for the fact that 3 yards on a 3rd and 10 is a failure, but 3 yards on a 2nd and 1 is a success. And then the breakthrough that I came up with was to compare every play to a league-wide average because it's easier to convert 3rd and 1 than 3rd and 10,
Right.
and then to adjust for opponents. So I've been doing this for over 20 years. We've worked on the formula a number of times over that period to try to make it as predictive as possible. And, it's really just been really useful for predicting how well teams are going to play in the future. Plus, because you figure it on a play-by-play basis, you can break it down into different, splits. For example, this year with the new Stats Hub at FTN Fantasy, you'll be able to see DVOA not only by things like down, but also by charting splits like DVOA in man coverage compared to DVOA in zone coverage. And because we have it for every play separately, we can give numbers like that.
Outstanding stuff. Yes, I looked at it a little bit here. Definitely looked at some of the splits with AJ Terrell and his new contract. Really great at one part of covering players, another part not so much. But definitely enjoy having him be back in Atlanta. I was looking at some of the things you put out there on Twitter or the X. I noticed that you had the Falcons as the worst rated DVOA defense, but with the additions of Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons, it's increased a little bit. Is that enough to help this team potentially push for the playoffs for the first time in 7 years?
Yeah, they were projected as the worst defense. That's different from DVOA during the season that measures
Right.
actual play. This is projection based on past numbers and personnel changes and whatnot. And I realized the Falcons were pretty good in standard stats last year, but when you adjust for their schedule, their defense was below average, and then they lost some players. But now they've gained some players. So there's no question their defense is now number 23 in the projections instead of number 32. And whereas in the simulation that I did for our new book, FTN Football Almanac 2024, in that simulation, the Falcons averaged only 7.6 wins and won the division 15% of the time. So I'm still lower on the Falcons than conventional wisdom, in part because I am skeptical about what Kirk Cousins can do coming off an Achilles injury. And so we only have them with an average offensive projection. But there's no question that Simmons and Judon were great moves and absolutely improved the team, especially because I had been writing for months that the Saints needed Simmons. And so not only did the Falcons add a good safety, they kept him away from a clear hole on a division opponent.
Yes, the team that the bitter rival you play twice a year, vying for the same two playoff spots, maybe just one within the division here. You mentioned Cousins with the injury. I know it's probably the same sort of thing with Aaron Rodgers coming back from his Achilles. How do you forecast a player who's been successful for so long but is coming off some major injury of this magnitude?
The first thing I'll say is it's very interesting. We have a separate projection for the quarterback that goes into our team projection. And you would think that the projection for a quarterback would be based on DVOA, which is a rate stat. How efficient was a player? But it's actually based on DYAR, which is our total stat. Guys who have injuries, even if they've played well when they were healthy, don't tend to be as good the next year at quarterback than guys who played the whole year at that same efficiency. So I think that that is showing us why we should be a little skeptical. And then with Rodgers, he just was very average in his last season in Green Bay. So now you're 2 years older and you're coming off the injury. I think you can't expect him to be much better than average, although that's obviously a huge improvement on the quarterback play that the Jets had last year. For the Falcons, if Cousins is average, that's also an improvement on the quarterback play they had last year, but
Yes,
not
yes.
as much of an improvement as it would be with the Jets.
Correct. Yes. Anything will be better than what the Falcons have had to deal with quarterback the last couple
That's
of
not
years.
true. What the Jets had last year is definitely not better than what the Falcons had last year. We had the Falcons 24th on offense. Like they were not, even if you only look at passing last year, we had them, they were actually 22nd in passing. So it was not as bad as you might think, even after you adjust for the schedule that they played.
Yes, that's the other question here. The Falcons have a very interesting schedule this year. It's very front loaded. Like the first 5 games are very tough. You've got the Steelers, you've got the Eagles, you've got the Chiefs, you've got the Saints and the Buccaneers, and then it evens up at the end there. So how
So
do you?
easy. It's the easiest
I
projected
know.
schedule in the league by our numbers. Yeah.
So when looking at this, if you go 2-3, 3-2 in the first part, you gain momentum, you gain confidence with a new team, a new coaching staff, and everything like that. How important is it to have an easier schedule down the stretch run with your forecasting and everything that
I
you
mean,
guys
I
do in
don't think it
FTN?
matters whether you play the easy games early or you play the easy games late. Either way, you're playing the easy games. And the AFC West, we do not think the Chargers are going to be as good as conventional wisdom thinks they're going to be this year. And nobody thinks the Raiders or Broncos are going to be any good. So we're in total agreement with the world on that. And that's all in the second half, right? That's all in the second half of the schedule for
Mhm.
those three
Yes.
teams for the Falcons. I mean, the thing about the schedule is that the schedule is almost as easy for the Panthers and the Saints. The Buccaneers schedule is a little harder because they were in first place last year.
Right.
But that's why, I mean, I said this last year and I was wrong, but I'm going to say it again. It would not be a shock to see two teams from this division make it to the playoffs because of the schedule, not because the teams are that good themselves, but because the schedule is so easy for the Saints and the Falcons. And it's easy for the Buccaneers too, just not as easy.
Right. Yes. It's not what you have to deal with the NFC North, where it's a bloodbath. Everybody's going that
Or
division's going to be pretty.
The AFC East and NFC West, which play each other, right?
Yes.
Which each division has three teams plus a fourth team that I think is a little frisky, right? Like the Patriots defense, I think, is going to be pretty good, and the Cardinals offense is frisky, and those divisions have to play each other. So those teams all have hard schedules.
Yeah, I'm definitely high on Arizona. I think they're about a year away there. I think that they're building that team up pretty well with Monty Austin for it and everything. A lot of the new Falcons coaching staff has come over from the Los Angeles Rams with Raheem Morris, with Zach Robinson, and with Jimmy Lake. How do y'all incorporate using like coaching staffs coming over in your forecasting? I think that's we're going to see a lot of what possibly made the Rams good, but with their own spin on it.
I'm going to say three things. The first is there are very few coaches where we have enough of a sample size of their careers at different stops to say that they really impact things.
Okay.
The second thing I'll say is all other things being equal, when you have a new coaching staff, things take a step back a little bit. You usually don't see it because those teams are usually bad. And the strength of regression to the mean is stronger than you lose a little bit with a new coordinator. But you do lose a little bit with a new coordinator. However, third thing I'll say, it's absolutely true that offensive coordinators from the McVay and Shanahan tree are better. Like they do better. Their teams have better offenses. And there is actually a variable in the system this year that boosts the offenses of teams with coordinators that come off the Shanahan and McVay tree. The problem for the Falcons is that the Saints also hired one of those guys.
Yes. Yeah, they're everywhere. That is the most it's absolutely fascinating to watch everything kind of stem off the Shanahan McVay tree over
It's
the last.
absolutely a reason to believe that the Falcons offense will be better this year, even without the quarterback change. Yeah.
Yes, I know it's Zach Robinson's first year calling plays. Obviously, he's been on McVay's staff. He played for Belichick, played for Mike Gundy there at Oklahoma State. Very well respected guy in the industry. Anxious to see what he can do. Did have a question about Raheem Morris. He had been in Atlanta on Dan Quinn's staff before. Does that help in anything, just with the familiarity of the organization?
I don't think there's a history that you would say that you would know that that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking for like a little correlation here, but if it's not there, no big deal. It's all good.
Also,
I
how
did
many
have
years ago was that, and how many of those players remain? Right.
like a few, but they were all like rookies. You're looking at like AJ Terrell, Chris Lindstrom,
Yeah.
Grady Jarrett, but yeah, not as many completely like the roster changes over 33% of the time year over year. So yes, I totally understand what you're saying with that. Matt Ryan was a very fantastic player for us for a long time. I think he's underrated. I think that like didn't get necessarily the national respect that he did. What do the analytics say about him potentially making it to Canton one day?
I mean, analytics don't play much of a role in players making it to Canton. That's the fact is, uh, I think as time goes on and we get more players that played in the era of my analytics and the era of Pro Football Focus, you will see a little bit more of a role of analytics, but there's still a lot of like stories from how like your contemporaries thought of you. And Ryan really only had 1 year where he was the best quarterback in the game. I
Right.
think that when it comes down to it, he'll be seen as falling just short, in part because titles matter a lot to the committee that picks the Hall of Famers, and he didn't win the title. Um, you know, I think if you asked me, I would say Ryan is right on the cusp of getting in, but I wouldn't necessarily vote for him. And my guess is that most of the voters feel pretty much the same way, and he won't get it.
Yeah, I'm kind of apprehensive about that too. He's kind of with the Boomer Esiasons, the Ken Andersons of the world of yesteryear, similar four Pro Bowls, one Super
And
Bowl
if
appearance, didn't
analytics is
win.
going to go to bat for anybody, it's going to be Ken Anderson before Matt Ryan.
I would
We are
totally
the
agree.
waivers of the Ken Anderson flag.
Been a big fan of his, hoping he gets into Canton one day. Before I get you out of here, I did have a question with FTN. I was noticing that like, is there anything your team is looking at potentially trying to find like a new angle, new data? I saw this past offseason that Jonathan Gannon and his staff at Arizona try to see is momentum a real thing, and they kind of came back like with their studies that's inconclusive, but you can kind of feel it when you're like out there. Is there anything your team is looking at?
First of
Uh,
all, momentum, my God, analytics has tried to look at this so much. It doesn't, the answer to momentum is it doesn't matter.
right.
Momentum does not exist in any way where we've been able to define it and measure it. And so you can babble on about it all you want. And it's nice if the players and the coaches feel like they feel it, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. Um, that's not to say it doesn't exist, but if it does exist, it's not in any definable way. So it doesn't mean anything. We're always looking at, I mean, I'm always looking at new research, and there's always new research coming out from things like the Big Data Bowl. And I mean, analytics has really gone far in the NFL, and there's always good new stuff coming out. And last year, I did the cornerback coverage DVOA for the first time, and route DVOA, which is measuring receivers based on their routes rather than based on their targets. And this year, we're working on trying to separate running backs from their offensive line a little bit more by adjusting running backs for how many men are in the box and how many blown blocks there are on running plays. And so we're hoping to come out with a new rushing stat at some point. And we're always looking at new stuff.
Absolutely, yes. Always have to. Where can we find the FTN, the Football Almanac? Anything else that we need the listeners and viewers to know about what's going on with FTN ahead of the
I mean,
season?
FTN has a ton of stuff. First of all, we have stuff in other sports, which I don't even do, but like we're actually I keep saying this on different interviews. Our golf stuff is really good. Like, I don't know anything about golf, but the guys who do know about golf are really good. The Stats Hub, the new Stats Hub with all of the different splits of charting that it's going to have live during the season is really good and very economical compared to alternatives from other companies. The Almanac itself, ftnfantasy.com/almanac for the online version. And for the physical copy, just go to Amazon and search for FTN Football Almanac 2024. It's the one with Travis Kelce on the cover.
Absolutely. Aaron Schatz, FTN, Chief Analytics Officer, thank you for your time. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for teaching me so much about the analytics world.
Thanks, and good luck to the Falcons proving me wrong this year.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Aaron.